Guys, everyone that's shown up so far, thanks for coming out. We have some great panelists today to talk about their Bethany experience, as well as how it's affected their future careers, what they're doing now, and what they plan on doing in the upcoming years. Panelists, thanks again for coming. I'm excited to hear all your different inputs and how things have been going since you've been to Bethany. So, with that being said, you guys can all introduce yourselves. Tell us maybe your major, what you guys did, organizations, activities you did at Bethany, and what you're doing now. I'm excited to hear.
All right, so we're just going to work our way across the window. So Ryan Cinco, you're up at the left.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ethan. Thanks for everyone having us. It's really great to be able to come back and kind of give what we know now to as many kids as we could, because I know whenever other alumni were doing that for us, we really appreciate it. But I graduated in 2019. I was a double major in managerial economics and finance. A lot of my extracurricular stuff was with Beta Theta Pi. I was a brother and also president there. See, we have a couple presidents of Beta here right now, so should be cool to see. But yeah, right now I'm working at UBS Financial Services. I'm also in grad school at Duquesne University for my MBA and specialize in finance. So I've been at UBS now for 2 years. I help in financial planning, asset allocations, different type of back office work for the group I work for. And we work out of South Point, PA here. So it's a little bit about myself right now. And I plan on graduating at Duquesne here in December of 2020.
And then Allison, please.
Hi, I graduated in 2015 in international economics, and then I came down to Disney to do forecasting as an intern, and then I did forecasting and planning with them for about a year, and then I was their analyst for their legal teams for about 2.5 years, and now I'm a senior revenue management analyst supporting restaurants, and I'm currently 36 weeks pregnant, so if I leave for some reason, that's why.
Congratulations. Christy Howe, please.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm a 2004 grad, so I think that might be one of the older ones on the panel. I was an international economics major and also active in Phi Mu fraternity and sports. I was a cross-country runner and swimmer. And now I'm working at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., although I'm actually starting my job virtually. I have not physically been in the building yet. And previously, I had 16 years working at the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is the statistical agency in the U.S. government that publishes GDP. So hopefully you guys are familiar with that and the website, hopefully, and get data from there. And I, after graduating from Bethany, got my master's in economics at American University. So I'll talk a little bit about how Bethany prepared me for grad school as well. Look forward to getting questions from you all.
And now Dakota.
Hi all, I'm Dakota Marvellis. I graduated in 2016 in international economics and political science. I currently am associate at Wiener Brodsky Kaiser PC here in DC. I graduated from George Mason University Law School earlier in May, and I just took the bar exam this week, so a little bit brain dead.
And then Tyler Frazee.
What's up, everybody? I'm Tyler Frazee. I'm class of 2019. I studied sports management while at Bethany, as well as I was a member of the baseball team, as well as a Kalon scholar. Right now, I'm currently in my second and final year of grad school, studying sports management at WVU, and I'm also an assistant manager with WVU baseball while I'm here.
And then Jacob Stemrich.
Hey everyone, my name's Jake Stemrick. Right now I'm working for BNY Mellon. There I'm a operations analyst. I do a lot of maintaining our database of our securities and derivatives for our clients. Prior to that, I worked for a small company called Management Science Associates, which is actually where I did more of an economics job. I worked for the tobacco industry, and what I did was sales analytics. So that's kind of where I did more of my analysis. Right now, I am a student at Boston College. I'm studying applied economics, getting my master's of science. And yeah, so I will talk about how, just in my first semester, how Bethany has helped me.
So those who know me, it's not a surprise that we're going to randomly draw who's going next to tell us first, how have they been using economics after Bethany? And so based on the random draw, okay, Dakota, could you please talk to us first about that?
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, George Mason is, the law school is known for their economics focus. So first year, you have to take a basic econ course. It's just like fundamentals of economics. I used the same, it was the same textbook as one of my econ courses. So I didn't have to buy like another textbook. So that was kind of cool. But every essay that you ever read in any of the courses, like I had to read it again. I had to read stuff from Becker and just, everybody else. The last year I had the opportunity to take a course and it was called an Law and Economics Colloquium. And basically the part of the course was we'd have scholars from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all the big Chicago, all the big names, and they would come in and they'd present papers that they're working on, and we would have to like critique the papers. And so everything was like law and economics focused. One essay that I can remember specifically, the guy was presenting about using AI to predict basically like small petty criminal offenses, so like speeding tickets, stuff like that. And basically the idea was that because law large numbers, if you looked at enough cases from any judge, they almost always rule the same way. And so he was trying to say like, okay, well, we can really reduce the cluster in the legal system by these like very obvious cases that always get ruled the same way. So that was really cool. Currently, I'm starting as an associate at this law firm, and I do financial regulatory work. So basically all of the banking industry. And we support mortgages, so we're always on the side of like people supplying mortgages, the companies. So we're always fighting against the government. But the econ stuff comes up a lot there as well. Not so much in like any specific principle, but just the general supply and demand and the economics focus, just that mentality that I learned from Bethany is really what it use it every day.
All right, and the cards have spoken. Christy Howe, could you talk to us about how you've been using economics after Bethany?
Sure thing. First, I want to say hi to Dr. Sapler. I see you over there now. Nice to see you. So yeah, as I said, I worked at the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and now I'm at the International Monetary Fund. So I'm very steeped in macroeconomic theory and practice. And so I have to say that my macroeconomics, and especially open economy macroeconomics, because that's specifically where I worked in the balance of payments area at BEA, was hugely helpful. I remember emailing Professor Sapler after like my first week of work and saying, it's exactly like we learned about in open economy macroeconomics. C plus I plus G plus X minus M is the bread and butter of BEA. And so I specifically worked on the X minus M part. I worked in the balance of payments area and produced the trade statistics that went into the GDP estimates. So, it was just really helpful to have that theory background, but also just to have exposure to data sources that are out there about macroeconomic trends, because that was a lot of the work that I did was looking at finding statistical series that trended well with whatever a series that you were trying to estimate. And I will say that the econometrics background that I had was very helpful. If anything, I think I probably wished I had more, and that's what led me to go on to grad school. And I understand you guys do a bit more now in the program with data science and things like that that wasn't around at all when I was there in 2004. So that's great, and I'm sure that's really helpful for future positions. But yeah, in terms of preparing for grad school as well, I think that the background that I had in both micro and macro was hugely helpful. I definitely had a lot of classmates that were not as prepared as I was. I felt like when it came to having just a solid understanding of economic theory, so I felt very well prepared for my future, and it's served me well in my career now. Working in the government, I was a statistician basically, even though my job title was an economist. But now being at the IMF, I'm back in policy, so that's a little. I'm still in a statistics role, but I'm exposed every day to policy, and so that's been kind of eye-opening. But certainly, I think you all will be well prepared for those types of roles, given the background that you get to that.
I'd like to make one quick point. Since Christy graduated, our research methods is a lot more regression oriented than it had been. So there is more regression than when you were here.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and that's a good segue actually to start bringing in Tyler, who's also at graduate school right now. And I think he was mentioning to me that that's been a big part of what's helped him at graduate school.
Yeah, so just going off of that, basically, as far as how economics at Bethany has helped me, I'm going to speak primarily upon the research methods class that I had there. And to be honest, I'll admittedly admit going into research methods at Bethany as a sports management student, you hear a lot of talk about how hard it is and how not too many people look forward to it. And I was one of those going into the class, but that perspective quickly changed as it went through the course as well as after the course. And it really hit home for me during my interview process going into grad school. I had worked with Dr. Hanswitz on my research methods project, as well as my senior project studying baseball analytics and regression analysis as far as that goes. And I had presented to the panel of interviewers during my WVU interview the two research studies that I completed, and I truly believe that really helped me get into grad school. I mean, when I presented it to it, I mean, just the look on their faces to see that I had actually been able to complete two empirical research studies while in undergrad. I mean, they straight up told me that's not something that they see every day. And that's truly a testament to the Econ program at Bethany and just the educational experience you get there. And so that was that. And then last semester, I was in a sports marketing research methods class that I had to take as part of my graduate studies. And there was about 30 kids in that class. And to me, I had talked with Hanswitz about a month ago about this. And it was just shocking that everything that I had taken away and learned in research methods, I was one of the only people that was kind of one step ahead of that class all the time. And to me, I was very thankful for that, as well as it was just eye-opening that the experience that I was able to get out of the specific research methods class at Bethany, I mean, it just put me that much ahead of the rest of the kids that are in my graduate program at Bethany. And that's, I mean, like I stated before, that's just a huge testament to Hanswitz as well as Dr. Sappler of what they actually do and the education they provide for us.
So something might help the students, because you've taken research methods, Stanford's taking research methods, since we've gone to the R-based research methods program. So is Ryan. You might want to tell them a little bit what is research methods, because they may not have an idea of that's what you're referring to yet, because they haven't experienced that course. And that's something for all three of you, because you directly have experience in that class.
Well, I guess I'll go first. So research methods is basically, putting it in simple English, how it just, so it studies regressions, and what regressions does is studies the relationship between the independent variables and the dependent variable. So your dependent variable, being in a math world, is y, and all your independent variables are like x, z. So it just studies the relationship between those variables. And seeing that in my job prior to this, I saw a direct correlation of the amount of sales in a specific state, in a specific area, based off of, okay, just changing a chewing tobacco can from the normal, just plain green can to the hunting can. You would see just having a, I guess what you could call it a seasonal change, just influences how much more revenue is sold, just something so small, just a can of chewing tobacco. So it's just seeing the relationship between those variables and seeing how it can impact the dependent variable, which in that case was sales.
So Tyler, building off what Jacob is saying here, what was the particular set of skills that you learned in research methods that you used? Because you're describing how research methods help you so much. What were you learning in research methods that you were applying?
Yeah, so I mean, like STEM had talked on, regression analysis is a huge one. Now, the research methods I have in grad school, it didn't really focus, it was more on the marketing side of things instead of regression analysis. So basically, some of the skills that I was able to take from the research methods class and use was basically just one huge part of it was just the basic formatting of an empirical or any kind of research paper. I mean, I talked with you personally about it, and one of the first things we talked about in this research methods class was how to construct and putting a literature review into our research papers while I was here at WVU. And I mean, to me, that was so easy because I did it twice with you, and the formatting was just, it's identical. And I mean, to be this research study at Bethany or with WVU, it was a group project. So I was able to kind of take the experiences I learned from formatting and how to construct something like a literature review and not only apply it into that class, but also kind of lead my group mates as well as some of my other classmates that didn't understand it at the time, kind of in the right direction and give them a better understanding of just how a basic research format is set up and the different aspects that go into it that is going to make a research study that much more better quality.
I'll jump in if I can.
Yeah, I was about to go to you next, especially since you also background in forecasting, which is, yeah.
Yeah, so this is pretty applicable. So I didn't know about data science as a field really when I was at Bethany, but I loved business cycles and forecasting, which I don't know if all of you have to take, but I took that with Dr. Sappler. Hey, I really liked that class. So when I started applying for jobs after graduation, I was specifically looking for forecasting because I didn't know what other terms to use for data analytics, but I knew that I liked that. And the research methods class also was one of my favorite classes. It had the regressions. We also did time series models and ANOVA, chi-square, distribution, different things. I liked all my stats classes. So I really fell into my current job with Disney because I just followed the courses and the work that I liked. So obviously I loved all of international economics, international trade and development. It was all really fun. But as far as what I saw myself doing 9 to 5 was more with regressions. When I started at Disney in forecasting, there was a lot of work that we did that was linking Excel workbooks and building models in Excel and things that I didn't think were quite as fun. They introduced to me SQL and SAS, which is basically the expensive license version of what you can do in RStudio and download for free. So I learned those skills because as you can kind of tell in our discussion right now with everybody, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago when I graduated, there wasn't such an emphasis on being able to pull your own data like there is now. And so if you are learning these things, if you're learning R right now, it's super beneficial. And I see in my workplace, the further up you go the ladder, the less people know how to pull their own data. And so in my organization, the newer people are always the best at computer programming. So if you can learn that, take classes on Python, R, SQL, those are probably the big ones, at least for where I work. If you can do that, it gives you a little bit ahead of other people, because your senior manager might not know how to pull any data. And so now you're super useful to them. They might have a CPA or something, but they don't know how to pull data. So yeah, that's why I think these classes are super important, and it works for me now.
Yeah, if I can jump in there quickly, just because in my role at BEA, I was in a management position before I left there, and I would just completely echo what you said about data skills. When we were looking to hire, we got to the point where we wouldn't really even hire anyone unless they had some exposure to R, Python, SQL, SAS, something like that. We were mostly using SAS and SQL because the government is a little slow to adopt new technology sometimes, but we were just opening up to letting some of our more savvy staff use R for certain parts of our production process. It's, in the government, it's challenging because once they adopt something, there's sort of this push for everyone to adopt it. So this idea of like letting some people use R while other people were using something else was a little scary to some of the management, but we were moving in that direction. And certainly I was one of the people that couldn't pull my own data, but I had staff that could do it. So that those people are hugely valuable.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's different proficiencies, like when you speak an actual language, and it's the same thing with your programming. So if you say that you can write SQL or you can use another tool, it's good to be able to kind of tell where you're at if you're interviewing. And one thing that I've been doing lately, so I don't use Facebook, but I use LinkedIn. And so if I'm going to be scrolling, I'll probably be like scrolling on LinkedIn. And I follow people who are computer programmers that like to post questions like, okay, if you were interviewing somebody and they say they have an intermediate level, what do you expect them to know? And you can read their comments and try and pick up like, okay, where do I fall on this? And then maybe you hear like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Maybe I can look up that. And everything's just a Google away.
So I know Stamrich can say more to that, but then Stamrich, make it quick. So I want to make sure we give Ryan a chance to talk about his experience and what was the how he's using Econ today. So Stamrich, especially since I know, for example, after you took your R at Bethany, what did you teach yourself to do for the job market? And you're not the only person who's done this after you've started picking up these other data skills.
So for my senior project, I taught myself how to program in Python and JavaScript. Those two actually work hand in hand, where if you want to scrape something off the internet, which is an HTML, you can write a JavaScript, which the Python will then read the JavaScript that you wrote and take the data that you want. I had a lot of help from a computer science major at the time, Tim Jones, who knew a lot more than me. So he sat down with me and helped me do that. But right now, like just seeing it, even just having a little bit of exposure as I did for the one topic, that helps you out a lot. So whenever I was interviewing with BNY Mellon, they asked me the question, what's R? They've never heard of R. So I explained that to them, and they said, okay, so what do you know in Python? And so I had to explain that. I had to say, well, this is how I used it. So just a little bit of exposure, just reading it, just seeing it is more than most of the job market, which is really good. So that actually I thought was just something small. I didn't think it was anything big. I just thought anyone can do this, but no, not a lot of people do it. It's something that can put you light years ahead of people. It's funny because there's people that would come from Carnegie Mellon that I work with, and she has never heard of any of the programs that we've dealt with, and it just kind of makes you think like, okay, so if this person that went to this prestigious college has no experience in this, but we do, that just shows how much Bethany has helped us. And as of right now, R is not just a regression analysis tool, it's a literally everything tool. As I'm learning right now in my class, I'm doing all of my code in R. So I'm running binomial distributions, Poisson distributions, normal curve analysis, ANOVA test, chi-square test. I'm doing everything on R. And it's just a very useful tool. And reading job descriptions now for what I want to do after I graduate, it's a useful tool that banks like Citibank, Bank of America, they all use if they want to get into quantitative analysis or if you want to get into risk management, which is what I want to do. So just a little bit of exposure is all you need.
And we've had a number of students, once they've learned R, done things in addition to that to particular those skills. We're talking about Python, Java, or they are really popular on SQL and SQL for database management. But I want to give Ryan a chance to talk about where he's used Econ after Bethany. So Ryan, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think the other panelists have really narrowed down the quantitative aspects of what you can do with economics, which econometrics are second to none in the industry right now. We have a whole source of analysts that's their specialty. They all work in New York, and we communicate with them daily. And that's been the biggest thing for me, economic wise, kind of what Dakota was saying on a broad level, is really understanding the jargon. When you go on a group or a team that like I'm on, they have a lot of anticipations of you knowing certain things so they don't have to waste their time teaching you those things. Well, I can tell you right now, just being a finance major wouldn't have done that. It wouldn't have been enough to understand the jargon, especially in some of the times that we've been facing now and how the Fed and different stimulus packages have gone through and how to relay that to clients. Because basically my job is I'm kind of the middleman of what STEM is trying to tell you guys. And I'm trying to translate that to what a client needs to hear and specifically what they have to hear. So I really use the qualitative aspects. Like I like to bring up, Wilf used to always use it for Ricardian equivalence. The story, I think it was George Bush in 2002 or 2000, I can't remember, that he sent out $500 checks individually to everyone because of the recession that just occurred. And that type of theory is everyone thought that they were going to spend it right back in the market. Well, what ended up happening is they started saving it. And we started to see that a lot with the $1,200 checks that was occurring recently. And for me to know that and be able to relay that to my boss and know, hey, this is, people save this. They know they have to pay for it later down the road. Well, we were able then to target a lot of clients, either their kids or younger siblings that were on our books, but we never really had a lot of conversations with. We said, hey, you guys just got your first time $1,200 check. What can we do to help you? Now, maybe they didn't use the $1,200 check to invest, but it opened up conversations and knowing that that was their mindset. So economics does a really good job from a psychology standpoint of knowing how people react. And just like a mini version of like a game theory is what I kind of sometimes apply. Sometimes we'll have a client that say they have $500,000 and they know they need $1 million to live off of, and they're only 60. So you don't have as much time to double your money as someone our age would. You have to be able to relay to them, hey, here's the costs and the externalities. It's almost like a game theory, what we're talking about, the prison dilemma, when you have your different scenarios. Okay, we can get your 500 grand to 1.5 million, but there's a chance you're going to go down to 100,000. How comfortable are you with that? So creating those conversations, making it understandable to people that are very established in the business world. I mean, we have a ton of, business owners that have done a lot more than me, but they mess up fundamental understandings of things. And when you're my age at 23 in an industry that's very, I would say a lot of the advisors are 50 to 60 years old because they have their book, they get their revenue, and they don't want to give it up for anyone. Being able to understand economic concepts with a finance background really helped me stand out, because everyone loves to talk about stocks and evaluations and who's going to buy what. We buy an Apple, Google, whatever. But the real conversations are being able to understand macro environment, what the Fed's going to do, what other people are going to do to you. And that economic importance can't be translated any more than in my business. So it's really helped me kind of look a little bit older than I am in my company.
The other thing, Ronnie, you were talking to me about earlier too, is because you're currently getting your MBA program. I heard that your training at Bethany's been helping you a lot there as well.
Yeah, I was going to get to that off the second question we were going to ask, but yeah, absolutely. Like it's kind of, I even personally sent a letter to the dean because I was just so amazed at the fact that we were going into this managerial economics course at Duquesne. Now, we're not as specified in an MBA. It's more of a management driven concept where you're kind of put in a place to say, okay, say you have 10 employees with you, how are you going to evaluate this case study? How are you going to do this? And there are these kids that will go to Pitt, go to Duquesne, CMUs, and they're going there. And they have to spend the first 2-3 weeks just discussing what elasticity is, understanding how what moves a supply curve, what moves a demand curve. And it was really astonishing to know that literally every single thing we were going first 2 months of the class, half semester, was literally just a review of managerial economics. Hope, to be honest, compared to the one that we use for Honjowitz. So really,
Ryan,
the way that
repeat that, because I think we lost you for a moment.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that honestly, the way that Wilf and the way that Honjowitz teach the classes, and the way that some of us I know can get aggravated at how hard the classes can be and how hard it can be to get the A, it really pays its dividends. And they used to tell me that, and I didn't believe it until I got to grad school.
And I say, Ryan, this is a good transition, and we'll let you continue with that. What were the courses at Bethany that were most important for you, especially after you left Bethany?
The two that stand out to me were business cycles and forecasting, and intermediate micro were probably my two, because intermediate micro really gave you a foundation of how to deal with people and how things react within a company, where business cycles and forecasting was your macro understanding of how things relate to each other and how theories and how people respond to certain events. And we've seen a lot of theories recently being tested because, certain inflation measures haven't been hit that we think should be. We have a $7 trillion, the Fed has a $7 trillion balance sheet when in 2007 it was, I think, less than $1 trillion. So a lot of certain aspects are being changed. And to really understand those and be able to comment on them, it just pays its dividends.
And Tyler, we'll have you go next. I know you have to get to a coaching event soon, so I want to make sure you get a chance to reflect on that as well.
Yes. So as I had mentioned before, I'd say the main course that I took at Bethany that really helped me was that research methods class, as well as just the one-on-one time that I had with Hans was working on my senior project. But even the most basic courses that I had to take as a sports management major, just micro and macroeconomics, at the time, I didn't really see the huge effect that it was going to have. But as you go farther, as I dig deeper into the sports industry, you just see kind of how economics affects everything. Even within the marketing world, you still have economics, and just having the basic understanding of, like Ryan had touched on before, of how and what changes the supply and demand of certain products or certain consumers. That's just a huge help. So I would say even specifically research methods, but even just like I said, the basic courses that I had taken with Honjowitz and Dr. Sapler in micro and macroeconomics was a huge benefit to me as I further my path down into the sports industry.
I'd like to say one more thing too, Hans. There was like a pretty good story that I like to look at is there was a testimony with Jerome Powell last year. I can't remember the senator, but I remember reading the article. He's a Wharton grad, and they're talking about cryptocurrencies and Libra, or I think, yeah, Libra, with Facebook and how they're trying to put it out. and they had a whole conversation. Jerome Powell just sat there and let these senators just shoot themselves in the foot. They were confusing Libra with LIBOR, the bank exchange rate over in England. So you have these Wharton level people discussing this on national television, and all that Jerome Powell has to do is sit there and let them shoot themselves in the foot. I can tell you, having just a simple understanding or taken 2 of Wilford Honjowitz's economic classes will never let you make that mistake.
I want to go off of that too. Sometimes there are things that seem common sense, but if you've taken economics, you have like a label for it or a graph. When I first left and people asked me what I majored in, I told them I majored in graphs, because give me a napkin and a pen and I'll show you why you're wrong, kind of.
There's one definition of economics that I've heard given where you use advanced mathematics to prove what you already know.
And Allison, so what courses were key for you developing that skill set and for you?
I mean, I would say the micro classes. So as Wilf would say, you can have like 10 economists in a room and get 20 different answers or whatever he used to say. Um, so obviously, if you look at macro and micro, you could have the same question and kind of get different answers. But I would say micro for me, I go to a lot. Incentives matter. You know, your basic principles. Incentives matter. Opportunity costs. I think about these things all the time, and just your cost benefit analysis, or your positive negative externalities, or your social costs versus your personal benefits. Like, I'm weighing this out all the time in just my regular thoughts. So I have a noisy neighbor and I'm like, his personal benefit is so high and the negative cost for society, like I think about it just differently because I was an econ major.
Well, and you're thinking about it a little bit differently now when, I don't know when the babies do, but when the baby's around, I'm sure that noisy neighbors have an even more negative externality on you than currently. Dakota, you said you're using a lot of theory. So again, same question for you. What courses specifically within the econ program really helped you today?
So I think I'd have to go with the I think I have to go with the micro courses. So when Allison was talking, something I thought about, a big thing in the development of legal doctrine is based on trains. And so that sounds weird, but like a lot of law was developed because trains are cutting across the country, and sparks from trains cause fires on people's land. And so we do all of this, the externalities, and we look at that a lot. So like one thing, the law of nuisance is something in which courts will actually look at, okay, well, is your use so just so invasive that it would be unfair to like the ordinary person? Would the community say what you're doing on your property is such a nuisance that it should be, that you can't do it, that you have to stop doing it? But also, like, a lot of this law, like with the trains, was that like farmers their fields would catch on fire because of train sparks. And I think it was Justice Holmes that rendered the decision, and basically it's the externalities and court, and because trains were so important, it was on the landowners to actually figure out ways in which to prevent fires, which just really turned out to be, don't have your crops the whole way up to the train track. Like, you need to leave like a buffer, but for the court to say, oh yeah, it's your land, but you still have to prevent the injury is a huge thing. So yes, externalities a lot. Also, I got to take some antitrust courses. So I didn't even remember this until earlier, that my senior project was on the antitrust cases against Microsoft. And this was like my first experience into like looking at like legal stuff. And I ended up last year I took a antitrust course with Justice Ginsburg and Douglas Ginsburg from the DC court, and he authored the opinion on the antitrust cases against Microsoft, and I just got to learn it right from him. So that was just, that's not really how I'm using it, but that was kind of just a really cool thing that I got to experience.
So for manager of econ students, when he talks about the economic stuff, that's also written by Ronald Coase, which we read again in Advanced Micro to talk exactly about that. I just want to make sure you know Coase is everywhere since we keep talking about Coase. Christy Howe.
Yeah, that came up too. I had to read that Coase theorem in different courses in law school.
What were the most important courses for you, Christy, when you were studying economics?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, macro, open economy macro, but also micro.
Can you check your microphone? You lost you for a moment.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so since my focus in my career has been macro, macroeconomics, but also micro, and it's an interesting part of BEA that I worked in because we were one of the only parts of that agency that directly collected data. So we collected data from multinational companies that had direct investment abroad or that were foreign. And so there was a lot of research that was done using that data on firm characteristics and firm decision making. So we sort of sat at that intersection of micro and macro. So again, echoing some of the comments that people made earlier, a lot of times it was just being familiar with the lingo. So I was not a micro expert and I wasn't doing research in microeconomics, but I remembered what they were talking about when they were presenting the research, and that was good enough for my role in reviewing their research. Yeah, the other thing I want to mention, which is maybe slightly different than what most people would say, but I would also put in a plug for the fact that I also took accounting courses. I found those to be really helpful as well, especially because of what I said, where we were collecting data from these companies and you had to understand how the economic accounting and the financial accounting differ. And so I found those classes to be very helpful, and I think that sort of just reinforces what I see as the broader benefit of a liberal arts education, because you do have that ability to not be so specialized that, had I taken economics at other colleges, maybe I wouldn't have taken such broad classes, but I did have an opportunity to get into accounting. They didn't have international business when I was there, but I did minor in Spanish, and that was my original idea, was to focus on sort of the international realm, and so I found all those classes helpful as well. And the last one I'll put in a plug for was there were some political science classes that I found hugely helpful. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was like a class where you had to read about the different thinkers of a different era, and it was the era that I just happened to take it in the fall semester, whatever year, and we covered like and all these things that I was hearing about reading. So I still have these books there.
And then Stemrich, any particular courses that you would want to highlight as being important for you that you took while you were at Bethany, particularly in econ, now that you're outside of Bethany?
My econ classes, I would definitely say research methods, just because of the coding and everything. But a theory class would probably be the business cycles and forecasting. That just gives you like the basics of forecasting and how to use Excel with it. But it goes so much further than that, which is something that I really want to learn more about. But I think what really helps me out the most is my statistics classes through math and real analysis, which I'm seeing more of in my master's degree. But right now, in my current job, I would say the programming helps me out the most, because if you know R, you can relay that to SQL real easily, and we use a lot of SQL queries all the time. So just really just research methods and business cycles of forecasting, because that just gives you the basics for what I'm doing, and it gives you the ability to grow from there.
I want to say something off of that. So when you're interviewing for a job and they say that they want R or SQL or any of these other skills, you can kind of interview your interviewer too and ask them, how much of my time is actually going to be in SQL and how much of my time is actually going to be in Excel? Because sometimes they desire these traits, but if they don't really know how to use it, or there's nothing really built up in these data sources already, like you don't know if you're going to start from scratch and everything's on you and they just assume you can do everything, or maybe there are some queries already built that you can build off of. So you can ask these questions so you know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, that actually helps you out whenever you're in the interview, because it shows the person that you're actually paying attention to what the job description is. That helped me out tremendously whenever I was interviewing, actually reading and understanding what's going on with the job description. If you see that, and it kind of makes you nervous, that's a great question to ask, because I work a lot more on with Excel macros, which is something that's just an automation on Excel. So like I don't do much coding, but it definitely helps if we need a fix, if there's an error in the code that wasn't there before. Well, just having that is just shows that you can fix it, and you might be the person that they need to fix it.
So for especially Allison and Jake, how do you identify sort of jobs that want that skill? If someone was going to go on the job market right now and they're looking for job listings where you're doing a background in that sort of analytics, what would you be searching for? How would you find it? And that also would go to Christy, especially as you have the experience with those sort of positions at the government. Where would you find that in the job listing of that's what you're applying for and that's what they're looking for?
I'll jump in real fast. I'm looking for the specific terms of SQL programming, those sort of things. Tableau, if you're into data visualization, in the preferred qualifications or in the qualifications or skills.
Yeah, that's where I find it. I just do simple data analysis search, and in the qualifications or the preferred qualifications, it will write out if you want if they want SQL or Tableau, SAS. So whenever I was at my first job and I interviewed there, I told them straight up. I said never heard of SAS, never heard of that program at all, but I do have some experience in R, and I am working with Python right now, and that was enough, because a lot of these programs, they're the same. It's just different. It's just different softwares. Some are free, like R. Some are a lot of money, like SQL and SAS. So that's what you're looking for. Just look in the qualifications, look in the skills, look in the preferred qualifications, look in the education part. It has it written out right there.
Now, this is going to be a general question for all of the panelists. What was the moment you realized that your econ education was going to be valuable for you after Bethany? Because I'm sure when you first got out of Bethany, you probably weren't sure, but there's probably a moment where you said, oh, yeah, this is helpful. I'll go with Tyler first, because he has to leave the soonest, I know. So
Can you repeat that question, please, Hans? I missed that.
what is the moment after Bethany, when you figure out that your econ education was actually going to be helpful for what you're doing after Bethany? What was that moment for you? And again, this is for everyone. So I'd recommend thinking about that because it will eventually get to you as well.
Yeah, so like I kind of touched on in my first comments there, I mean, the real eye-opening time for me was during my graduate school interview here at WVU. I mean, it was the moment that I presented the copies of the research studies that I had completed while in my undergrad at Bethany that, I mean, just like I said, their reaction to see like the work that I put in as an undergrad and basically the education that I received at Bethany, I mean, whenever I saw the reaction from the panel there interviewing me, I mean, that was when it really hit me in the middle of that interview, just how special, I mean, not only the economics program, but just the education as a whole at Bethany really is for me.
Dakota, when was that moment for you? When was that moment you realized?
Immediately, it was immediately. I started working for PNC Financial Services and their legal department. And something that I might not think about, the PNC legal department gets served with summons, like court summons by mail daily. And they have to keep track of all of that mail. It's, very important. If you don't answer a complaint or something, you get default judgment against you. So something that I did, and it seems silly, I made an Excel book in which it tracked every piece of mail that we were getting, where it was going, and they ended up incorporating it into their annual report that goes to shareholders. And I made this program so that everything was locked. The only thing, it was locked by password. The only thing you could do was enter data for that date in the file, and it would automatically update several pages of things, including graphs of where we're getting heavy mail traffic, where it's going, where it came from, how long we have to respond to the different whatever, usually it's 90 days or something, so how many days are left on certain things. And I mean, my boss just thought it was the coolest thing he's ever seen. And you guys are talking about SaaS. I barely was able to use RStudio my senior year. But back in the dark ages, we used Excel a lot. So my boss just thought it was the coolest thing ever that I was able to do that on Excel, and, made him look good. So that made me look good. And yeah, so that's my story.
Allison, what was that moment when you realized that econ was first going to be useful for you out after Bethany?
Well, I would say Bethany specific. I did the McCann Family Investment Fund all 4 years, and I didn't have a lot to put on my resume after that was applicable to finance and those sort of things. So I had it on my resume, and the manager who interviewed me was a brand new forecasting manager. He came from finance and he was on Wall Street before that. So it was just a good in that I could kind of talk to him about stocks and different things that maybe most graduates aren't as familiar with. I think people think they know about stocks and there's a lot more to it. So if you can actually use the right jargon, that can get you a long way.
Christy, what was the moment you realized that your Bethany education economics is going to be useful after Bethany? What was that moment for you?
So I would say for me, it was before I graduated, but that's because I lined up my job with the government before I graduated. And when I started looking for jobs, I was, pleasantly surprised to find that you could get a job being an economist without having a PhD. I had a lot of friends at the time who were getting degrees in history or German or communications, and they weren't really sure what they were going to do with them. And most of them were going to go to grad school or were going to go to law school. And, I mean, the joke is, right, I go to law school if you want to be a lawyer, but sometimes you go to law school because you wanted to have a couple of years to figure out what you wanted to do. So it was, it was just nice to know that I could get a job and earn a paycheck with just my degree from Bethany. And I did go on and get my master's, but you know, I felt like I was well prepared to actually start a career. Where I think a lot of times college students come out after 4 years are not really fit into the job market. A lot of the things that I'm hearing even more so than when I was there, that Econ is preparing students to actually go out and get a job and do what they did in their classes. So that's great.
Ryan, when was the moment you realized that your econ education at Bethany was going to be useful for you? What was that eureka moment for you?
Yeah, so I can say when I first started at UBS, when you just kind of turn on you're allowed to get logged in, you get all your certifications, you turn on their system, the Bloomberg terminals come up, Thomson ones come up, all this stuff, and like you're pretty overwhelmed really quickly. You see all these research pieces start flying at you and whatnot. But when I first got there was about 10 interns of us there was 10 interns in the office, and usually they only keep 1 or 2. So people kind of knew it was going to be a little bit of a dogfight. And I just remember the one girl, she was a CMU grad. She was going to Pitt to do her MBA through their really extensive program, because Pitt has a pretty good program as well. And she goes to our boss and tries to quote this research piece because this analyst put in there about an antitrust issue with all the tech companies. And that's like, what's the effect going to be on tech? And she goes up to him and tries this one off, like try to prove to him. And she goes, oh, they put a spelling in here. They spelled monopoly with an O. And what they were talking about was an oligopoly, not a monopoly. So like right there, right in that second, I said, wow, like all those micro econ classes talking about how different types of monopolies operate. In that second, almost 5 minutes, 10 minutes into the job, I knew that, wow, that economics degree really just paid off in that 1 second. Because right there, I was able to differentiate myself from my boss. And it's led to me to keep my relationship and have a position open for me after school.
And Jake, what was that moment when you realized that your econ education was going to be useful after Bethany? What was your moment?
I would say probably a couple weeks after I started my first job, when I had a one-on-one meeting with my manager, and he was just explaining everything within 2 hours. And I was sitting there and I was finishing his sentences because I understood what was going on. And he just looked at me and he was just like, well, how'd you learn all this stuff this quick? I was like, I learned it the past 4 years. And he just, and like, that's whenever I realized, yeah, like that, like the economics classes that I didn't have to take, but I took anyway, that is what's separating me right now. As a math major, I focused in actuarial science. Unfortunately, I failed the classes, I mean, the tests that I needed to pass so far. But just going to like a normal job and starting everything, I realized like the economics is more important than the math. I understand that it works, but the economics taught me why it works. So that was the whole point. That was the point of my career so far, that I realized economics is the way to go, which is why I'm doing applied economics now.
So as you've seen, for everyone here, economics has been an important part at their time at Bethany, but especially today we've talked about their time after Bethany. And again, they've gone to a variety of fields here. We have people who work in government. We have people who are involved in sports. We have people who work in the private sector. We have people who specialize in banking and in law, in macroeconomics, in market research that helps people not just have grandiose big ideas, but research that's being used to make practical decisions. I think Allison and Jake in particular could talk about that. Research that's informing policymakers and other researchers. Christy can tell you a lot about that. And in the end, research that they're doing that's informing practical people. Ryan's hit upon that as well. So this is a key part of not just a general idea. This is a key part of what they're doing in their life after Bethany. And it's not just applying to their work setting. Allison's already alluded very well how it's applying to her personal life with her neighbor. You know, you're seeing we have real practical applications here that not just make you a better job candidate, but are also informing your life as well.